Hey guys, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Um, this sermon is called Whilen Out. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for all that you've done and all you're about to do. Speak to me in the name of Jesus. Let your spirit permeate every word in the name of Jesus. Amen. Hi guys, hope you're doing well today. This sermon is called Whilen Out. Now, when I first heard this title from the Lord earlier this week, I'm like, what do you mean? And He brought me to the song a few years ago done by Kanye West and Rihanna called 4 5 Seconds. And it's basically about how these people are 4 or 5 seconds from losing it. And basically, he wants me to talk about managing your emotions without stuffing your emotions. This has been a challenge for me because I'm a stuffer. I stuff down my emotions until the breaking point, and when I can't handle it anymore, then I just cry or have an emotional outburst. And what the Lord's been teaching me is, He said, Rachel, it's not either or, you could have both. You don't have to like spew that everything comes out, but you don't have to stuff. He's like, there can be a middle ground. And whether you're a spewer or a stuffer, there can be a middle ground. And he's like, working with him to working with God or a therapist or both to find a middle ground is the key. The Lord wants, first of all, let me say, the Lord wants you to be emotionally, physically, spiritually healthy. He says, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in health. Not just physical health, but He wants us to be in mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And what that means is He wants everything to be working to its highest and best use. So He wants you to physically be at your highest and best use. Not to impress people and say how much muscles I got, but so that your tempo could be in top shape, so that if He tells you to go, He wants you to be able to go. And He wants you to be able to discern things. He wants you to mentally be in top shape because He needs you to discern things and be at your highest and best use mentally. He wants you to discern things and prosper and be in health. And when I mean prosper, I don't mean a lot of money. That's only one definition of prosperity. But what I mean when I say prosperity is He wants you to have total shalom, total peace in every aspect of your life. total peace and total wholeness, total integrity in every aspect of your life. And he said that I need my people to be emotionally and spiritually healthy. And that's his intention for you. And now, I am no expert on anything like this. I'm just talking about what worked for me. That's where I'm coming from. So I'm no doctor or anything like that. But I've lived. I've been a stuffer for practically my whole life, and at times I've been a spewer. So let's define those terms. When I say a spewer, I mean when something happens, there's an explosion that happens in your body, and you just explode in anger, explode in tears. You manipulate through anger, or you manipulate through tears. So when something happens to you, you get so angry and that you intimidate and manipulate people through anger. Or you just explode. And that's another form of exploding. That's another form of what some people do when they get angry or when they get emotional. They just take it out on other people, either physically, emotionally, mentally. They spew whatever they say onto other people, and the Lord doesn't want you to do that. And on the other side, there are people like me who just stuff and stuff and stuff. And the problem with stuffers is the explosion doesn't happen right away. It's a slow burn. But eventually stuffers explode as well. But for them, the explosion happens over time. So one thing happens, and they say, "Oh, I'm okay, I'm okay," and then another thing happens, and they say, "I'm okay, I'm okay," but it's a slow burn. And by not dealing with it as a stuffer, it still has the damaging consequences because you're not letting it out. The other day, I was listening to something, and this was a nominal thing. This is not even an emotional thing. But I started to get emotional, and I'm like, Lord, what's happening? He's like, it's getting to you because what the character's going through right now is actually what you need. So that's why it's getting to you emotionally. He said this book may be a character, but it's getting to you emotionally because it is what you need, and that's why you're having such a reaction to this. And first of all, whether you're a stuffer or a spewer, the first thing to do is find a strategy that works for you. Because I think the mistake that preachers and psychologists and all of these people make is they come up with a strategy that works for one person or a couple people, and they say, oh, you should try this, without knowing the person's situation. So, uh, so you could see a married couple and say, how do you do it? You need to do a marriage seminar and whatever. And so they give you confidently and all of this, the marital tips that work for them. You go home and you say, okay, this works for them, so it might work. It must work for me. So you go home and try these marital tips, and they don't work for you. Same thing with singles. There are all these books and stuff about being single and how to be single successfully, and all these seminars. And sometimes you go home and try to apply these tips, and they don't work for you. And you're like, why isn't this working? And the Lord is saying, well, that's not your strategy. You see, the heart, and same thing with preachers, they tell you to do these things, and you're like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And you're like, yes, hallelujah. And then you go home and you try these strategies and they don't work for you. And you're like, oh my God, but the preacher said if I just do this, it would work, but it's not working for me. And I'll tell you a key that the Lord told me. For every struggle, there is a strategy. And for the strategy in your life, the best thing I find to do is consult the Lord first. And even with that, people will say, well, to get to hear the Lord's voice or to develop a relationship with God, you need to read His Word, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. And what I've come to know is for very few things in life, there are definite strategies that work for everybody. For most things in life, how I'm doing things works for me. It's not the strategy that God has given you. What happens is you need to find the strategy that is designed for you. And the only way to find the strategy is to go to the ultimate strategist, which is God, and ask Him what is the strategy for this. And you'll say, Rachel, how do I do that? How do I hear the voice of God? Well, you'll hear a lot of preachers say all of that stuff. They'll say it's through the Word, they'll say it's through this, they'll say it's through that. And I'm not negating any of that. But I'm saying there are different, depending on the person you are, God has a unique strategy for you in your life, in your life circumstances. And I think if we were to get this in the world, um, people would be out of business because, um, to be quite honest, people make money on finding these strategies, or people people help people by finding these specific ways of doing things. Like self-help books would totally go down, and all this stuff would go down if we would learn to find the strategies that we need to find for anything in life come from the Lord. So your strategy for violence, for keeping it cool, may be to count to 10. Or your strategy may be to say a prayer, to say a specific prayer, to, do a specific thing. But that strategy may not work for me. So the first step to finding a strategy for managing your emotions would be to go to God and say what the strategy is. But sometimes people don't have that kind of relationship with God. See, a relationship with God, like any relationship, takes time, takes work, takes really ingenuity to know how God is speaking to you, because all his children are so different that he he has different strategies for them. Like the strategy for me being single is a different strategy for you being single. And although we can take some of the tips, but be mindful that strategy could be tailor-made for me. You could use it and it may work for you, but it may not work for you. And how you find the strategy that works for you is to get into a rhythm with God. Find out how he speaks to you, how he develops strategies in you, how he talks to you. Because if you can find out how he talks to you, then you would know whether he's speaking. Sometimes he talks, generally, everything he says has the basis in his written word. And sometimes he talks to other people, sometimes he talks through music, sometimes he talks through a TV show. He generally uses your personality to communicate with you. So if you're a golfer, he will use golfing metaphors. If you're a singer, he will use music. If you're a fisherman, he will use fishing to speak to you. He uses your personality and your quirks to speak to you and to communicate with you. And when you understand how he communicates with you, he will give you strategies on managing your emotions on anything in life, actually. So, so that's the first thing. So get to know God and get to know your specific strategy. And what I find is communication and different communication styles. Get to know your best form of communication. Are you a written communicator? Are you a verbal communicator? Are you a are you a tactile communicator, which means do you like to use movement? Do you like to use your hands? Do you like to use your body to communicate? So if you find your strategy for handling your emotions and how you like to communicate that strategy to people, it won't solve it, but it'll make it a lot easier. Because sometimes with emotions, we all have emotions, and they're great, but we just need to know how to manage them. We need emotions. Emotion, emotions cause us to be driven to change something and be driven to have, have purposeful, God ordained lives. Um, and but but the tricky thing with emotions, if you don't manage them, they will destroy you. If you if you spew them out and explode on everyone or manipulate people, um, it will destroy you. If you stuff them, like I tend to do, saying everything's all right, no, everything's okay. When you're mad as hell, it will also destroy you. It will eat you from the inside out. And everybody will. And the thing with stuffers is when it's eating you, people won't see it right away. People will see your smile and whatever and won't see it right away. What I've learned to do is just go to God and acknowledge that I am having this right now. And I'm having an emotional reaction. And I've learned to view God as kind of a friend that I cannot see. So I talk to him as I would talk to you. And that kind of frees me uh, to deal with my emotions. And when I do that, he will say, you need, he will tell me if I need to go to the person, if I need to talk to the person, if I need to, if I, he will let me know how I need to deal with it, using the ways that he communicates with me. But this this is years in the making that him and I have been doing this together. Where I've just learned to let the religious guard down and let him into the scary places. And so I let him let him see my broken places. Let him see the things that scare me, all that. And that keeps me from kind of stuffing and stuffing and stuffing. And even if the emotional thing is hard, it is still it's still beneficial for me because it frees me to be the woman that God wants me to be. Because if you're stuck in your feelings or stuck in your thoughts, none of those are good. Because if you we always say, you can't be in your feelings. You can't be in your feelings. And I know what we mean, but that's kind of wrong. My opinion is, and this is only my opinion, you, you can be in your feelings, but don't let your feelings drive you. You can feel what you feel, but don't let your feelings drive you. And same thing with thoughts. The logical side of you need your thoughts. You need logic. You need to think through things. You need to always do that. And we need a balance of thoughts and feelings to have a life. And the Lord has different, if you're a very analytical person, the Lord has strategies for you to deal with your analytical self. If you're a very emotional person, the Lord has strategies to deal with your emotional self. And sometimes we try and sum it up in catchy terms, and we try and alliterate, and we try and spell words and all that stuff. See, as preachers, I mean, we try and do an alliteration, we try and spell words, and we try to make it easy for people to remember. But to tell you the truth, sometimes life is just hard. Sometimes it's hard to get this thing right, but we can get this thing right. We can have the balance between our thoughts and emotions. Because if we don't get our thoughts out of control, we will reason our way out of purpose. But if we don't have reason at all, we'll just go ahead. I'm feeling happy, so we can go ahead and be emotional. I'm saying that the balance has to happen for both. It can't be, you can live in your feelings, but don't let your feelings drive. You can have feelings about stuff, but don't let your feelings drive. You can have thoughts about stuff, but don't overthink it to the point where you reason yourself of your destiny. Some of you right now are reasoning yourself of your destiny. You're reasoning yourself out of that God-ordained relationship. You're trying to see around every corner. But the reality is, you can't. You will never be able to come up with all these things for every corner. You will never be able to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So planning is key, but you can't stay there planning forever. Sometimes you just gotta go. You just gotta go and trust that God has your back. And for you non-planners, you just who just say, let's go, and we'll just do it. Planning is necessary because with planning, you can, you, you kind of know what step you're taking. So planning is necessary, but so is a bit of spontaneity. Um, so balance is the key. And so that's what will prevent you from whining out. First of all, there's the strategy that you you can you find with God, and or you find with God, or maybe the strategy may be to go to a therapist, or to go to a friend, or to sit down with a pastor. Whatever your strategy is, get in communication with God and say, what's the strategy for this struggle? And number two, communication. And one thing I forgot to say about communication, everybody's communicative styles are different. The way I prefer to communicate are different. That's why I said before, you've got to know your communication style and the communication styles of those around you, because they may need things communicated in a different way than you do. So when you communicate, let's say you're a talker and you communicate verbally and you say to someone, do this, and you're like, and they're like, and you're like, why are they doing it? I'm talking and I'm talking, and they don't seem to be listening. Well, maybe they don't communicate that way. Maybe they don't understand what you're trying to communicate. And sometimes it's good to find out people's different communication styles and find out a way to communicate the message. So, because communication is not so much about hearing, it's about listening and finding responding using actions. So, because you can hear anything. A few years ago, I talked about talking versus communicating. And I said talking is just hearing words. And communicating is about not only hearing the words, but acting to get a beneficial result for both parties or something like that. So are you just talking or are you communicating? And is the person understanding what you're communicating? I think miscommunication breaks down all kinds of relationships. And that's why people wild out sometimes, because it's what the person is hearing is not what you're meaning. So communication requires understanding. I'm talking communication with people. Communication with God is different. And I'll get to that in a second. But communicating with people requires hearing and understanding and acting for a beneficial result for both parties. That's what communication is. Talking is just saying words. So if if somebody says to you, let's talk, what they mean is let's communicate. Let's come to something beneficial. And that's something I've had to learn in my years of just like not assuming that the person understands what I mean, because sometimes they don't, and it causes problems, and it causes people to while out, as I said, to just go in, to just go see, to just go um, to just go off. And the Lord really wants us today to prosper and be in health. And He wants us to not to understand that we have emotions, but not let the emotions have us. And to understand that we have logic, but don't let the logic reason us out of our purpose. Because sometimes logic and reason can reason us out of our purpose. Emotions and logic need to work together. And if we can find the strategy for the balance to use emotion and logic, our lives would be not perfect, because nobody's life is perfect. But when hard times come, we will know how to deal with that. And if we know the strategy, if we ask the Lord for the strategy and know how He communicates with us, we'll know how to deal with stuff. And yes, we will fall, but it won't keep us down. And I'm saying all this to tell you that it's okay. We all have issues with communication. We all have issues with using too much logic and too much emotion. We all have issues with that. Some of us are stuffers, like myself, as I said, and some of us are exploders. Don't think because there are so many people talking about emotions that they don't have their struggles too. Myself included. We all have our struggles. We all are going through this thing called life, trying to figure it out. We don't know the things either. We're just giving you tips that help us. I'm just telling you what God told me. I'm no expert, but this is what God told me in dealing with my emotions, dealing with communication, and dealing with people. And there are not enough sermons about this kind of thing. And I think that's what we need. We need it. We need it in business. We need it with our families. We need it in romantic relationships. We need it in our friendships. We need to learn how to deal with each other. The cross goes both ways. It goes horizontally and it goes vertically. And I think in the church we've got the vertical thing down. We've got our worship to God down. It's our relationships with people and how we relate to people that we've got messed up. And that's why I say that we need music that reflects both sides of life. We've got music that reflects the vertical, the horizontal side of life, like the worship to God thing down. But we need more songs about how to deal with friendships, how to deal with relationships, either romantic or whatever. We need more art like this in the church because we're people too. And your relationship with God can be perfect, but the way you relate to people is so messed up. You're out there wilding up because we don't know how to deal with people. We don't know how to do business. We don't know how to do friendships. So we just end up alone because we're not taught like this in the church. We're taught about Peter, Paul, and Jesus, um, but okay, that was nice to know how to get out of the boat or whatever. But what if I get out of the boat and people just make me upset? So I want to go in the boat again. We need to start talking about real issues. We need to start talking about communication because this is what cause this is what causes people to die emotionally in the church. This is what causes people to leave the church because of hurt feelings, because they weren't communicated with well, or they were ignored when they tried to speak, or when they tried to be a part of that ministry, they were refused because of, you know, something else. And we need to get this communication thing right. We need to get this emotional and logic thing right because this is what's killing our relationships. And the Lord wants us to prosper and be in health. And health doesn't mean just physical healing. Health means shalom, wholeness, togetherness, integrity. The Lord wants us to be in health, and we need to start talking about these issues more. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this sermon today. I hope that it helped you. God bless.